This is Covering the Spread. Here are your hosts, Jim Saunders and Dr. Ed Feng.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome on into Covering the Spread. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com, where today we are talking about the return of Major League Baseball coming up later this month with Nick Kostos of You Better You Bet, breaking down his favorite bets for the futures market as MLB gets set to return. My name is Jim Saunders. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as always by Ed Feng. You can find his work over at thepowerrank.com. Ed, it is July 1st today when we are recording, which means baseball is coming back this month, MLS coming back 1 week from today, NBA coming back at the end of this month. It's a good month to be a sports fan once again. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to all those sports, especially because the Bundesliga just ended. And like I mentioned on the show, I'm not as much of a fan of English soccer as the rest of the world seems to be. So I'm definitely, particularly looking forward to the NBA coming back, seeing how these players adapt. I thought it was really interesting this morning. I think there's been a lot of talk about how is the NBA going to start? The cases in Florida are spiking right near where they're trying to play. What is the league going to do? And Adam Silver said today is like, well, we're going to take all precautions. But I thought what was interesting is that he did not have like a predetermined number of cases for him to shut down the rest of the season. And I thought that was interesting because, well, don't you really want that number now? I mean, you want that number. You want to make that decision ahead of time and not make kind of an emotional decision later when, maybe you're getting a run of cases on teams and try to figure that out. So the NBA is a pretty thoughtful league. I think they will do the right thing. I just think it's interesting that they don't have like a number. And I don't think any of these leagues have a number.
And I think that if you are to put faith in any league to be mindful of these things coming back, it's probably the NBA, because you've heard Adam Silver talk at Sloan before, I assume. I was at a talk that he gave once where they talked about how they look at where League Pass viewership changes to know when they need to change the game, and that led to some changes with timeouts, late and halves, and stuff like that. Like, they are an analytical organization, and I guess that made me also be a bit surprised they didn't necessarily have a number. But it also gives me a level of confidence that if they get to a situation where things are getting out of hand, I guess I have faith that the NBA will do the right thing. I mean, we can question this whole plan to begin with. Maybe it's not the right thing anyway. But I think if it gets to a point where things are getting out of hand, I feel like if I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to anyone, it would be basketball over the NFL, Major League Baseball. Like, at least I feel like they've earn more of a benefit of the doubt than other sports, at least.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen Anthony Fauci talk about how, these leagues need to quarantine the entire league, which is obviously more possible in basketball than it is in football, where there's probably just too many people to do that. But still, there's a lot of places they could have picked to go play. They managed to pick one of the hotbeds of new COVID cases, which, you have no idea. I mean, that's just pure bad luck from when they planned this. So, but yeah, but on the plus side, I think they are going to start the season. Hopefully they will finish out the playoffs, and hopefully it'll be great.
We're going to talk about the NBA with Nick Kostos. Once again, we can find Nick on Twitter at the Kostos. He is a host on You Better You Bet on radio.com. We're going to go through a bevy of topics with Nick. We're talking MLB, how the 60-game schedule impacts the futures market from a betting perspective, his willingness to enter said futures market. We're going to talk about the NBA, how he's viewing things as they come back from the COVID-19 layoff, and, of course, get some NFL talk in there with Cam Newton signing with the New England Patriots as well. And Ed will talk about that in Covering the Future in just a bit. But quick reminder once again to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, the Google Play Store, iHeartRadio, you name it, you can find us there. Make sure you are subscribed if you like what you hear from Ed, me, or Nick. Make sure you leave a rating and review as well. Now, before we get to Nick, we have to go back to last week. We had Colin Davey on to preview the Travelers Championship. Ed talked some soccer, I talked NASCAR. Let's go back through all those before we talk to Nick.
Covering the past.
Last week here on Covering the Spread, we had Colin Davey on to chat about the Travelers Championship and talk about his process for betting on golf. Make sure you follow Colin on Twitter at ADJBaseline. Colin mentioned 4 guys he was thinking to bet for outrights for the Travelers Championship. He had Xander Schauffele at 25-1, and Viktor Hovland at 38-1, Colin Morikawa at 39-1, and Scotty Scheffler at 75-1. It was a pretty bloody week all around where there were a lot of popular golfers who missed the cut, and it was a pretty volatile event for sure, but did get Viktor Hovland. He was tops in that group, finished 11th, Xander Schauffele 20th, Morikawa and Scheffler both missed the cut, but they were all 25 or 1 to longer. Colin had mentioned how he wanted to go for longer shots in kind of a weird event. Dustin Johnson won. So definitely an interesting event, and DJ surging once again after a rough couple of months, but good to see him getting back in the swing of things. And I'd still check out Colin's discussion because I thought the discussions around judging current form are going to be pertinent for a long time. Evergreen content there. So make sure you check that one out. And big thank you to Colin once again. Ed, on Covering the Future, you had talked about wanting to buy into Southampton, and they had 2 games after that discussion. First one against Arsenal on Thursday. Southampton was plus 160. They fell in that one 2-0. But then on Sunday, Southampton was facing Watford, and Southampton was plus 210 to win that game. Watford was plus 140, so underdogs there. But Southampton came through for you. They got the win 3-1. So a loss to Arsenal, but a big win as an underdog on Sunday. It seems like the numbers did play out pretty well there for Southampton.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of the Arsenal match, and they did not look good. Not only did they lose 2-0, but expected goals, it was 2.7 for Arsenal to 0.8 for Southampton. But definitely did get the win over the weekend. My numbers had about 42% for them to win that. So, again, something my numbers saw, and then definitely leaned on the soccer knowledge of Ted Knutson, who was on the show a couple weeks ago. So, big part of my talking about those games was him, so definitely want to mention that.
Yeah, absolutely. Ted, we had on a couple weeks ago. Find him on Twitter at Mixed Nuts, KNUTS. Your EPL numbers are up on the Power Rank as well, correct?
They are. thepowerrank.com/predictions. I'll get soon. Actually, by the time this is up, I'll have numbers for next week's games. So there's a couple tomorrow. Big Man City Liverpool match, and then they'll start again on Saturday.
Perfect. So check those out at thepowerrank.com. I discussed a couple of bets I liked for Pocono, specifically in the Saturday race. Those 2 drivers were Ryan Blaney, who was 13-1 at the time, and Tyler Reddick, who was 75-1. Blaney had a pretty fast car in both the races, but Pocono is a strategy-heavy track, and Blaney did not hit the strategy in either race. On Saturday, he was 3rd in the opening stage. He was 4th in the second one, but got off schedule at the pit stops, finished 12th there. Reddick was driving a Chevy, and that entire manufacturer group was terrible. So didn't show a ton of life. He had issues both those days. I feel better about the Blaney bet than the Reddick one, even though Reddick was 75-1. Blaney did not hit. However, we'll be talking about him later on in this podcast because I'm just going to keep on doubling down on Ryan Blaney until he really gives me a reason not to. So we'll talk more about Ryan Blaney and NASCAR in Covering the Future today. But first, we got to get to Nick Kostos. And a quick reminder that FanDuel Sportsbook is giving you a chance to get in on the action risk-free. Create a FanDuel Sportsbook account today and place your first bet. If you lose, you will receive a refund of up to $500 in site credit. It is that easy. For more details, visit sportsbook.fanduel.com. Offer valid for new users only. Must be 21 years old. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's bring on Nick Kostos now of You Better You Bet. Make sure you check out You Better You Bet on radio.com and follow Nick on Twitter at the Kostos, Kostos. We're talking MLB's return to play, a little bit of NBA, and of course, can to the Patriots right now with Nick Kostos.
Covering the present.
Let's bring Nick Kostos back into Covering the Spread. Nick, it's been a bit. I think we last talked to you during the NFL playoffs, and a couple of things have happened since then. So how you doing today?
Jim and Ed, great to be on with you guys. Being on your show kind of indicates to me that we've got at least a little bit of normalcy back in our lives. So great to be on the show. I feel like everybody else just trying to stay sane during this pandemic. I feel like the first couple of weeks I was kind of like cloaked in existential dread, and as time has gone on, you realize not the end of the world. Life's going to continue to go on. God willing, we get a vaccine sooner rather than later. But I mean, I guess all things considered, it really could be a lot worse. Loved ones happy and healthy. Hopefully it stays that way. So hopefully the same for you guys and all the listeners as well.
Yeah, the priorities there sound right, which is always a good thing. But what did you do during the months where we had no sports? Because it was a legitimate 2 months before even NASCAR and UFC came back. So what did you do to occupy your time? Because You Better You Bet was off during part of that time too.
Yeah, actually, it was really cool because we actually got a great opportunity on the show where they took You Better You Bet and simulcast it on all like the intercom stations around the country. And Ross Tucker and I did like a countdown to the NFL draft for about 2.5 weeks, which like got us in front of a new audience, which was really cool. And then we had some time off, which at the time, like before it happened, I was like pretty bummed about it, but as I was kind of like, I actually kind of enjoyed the time away from everything. What I missed was though, and really I think the big thing for me was, and I've done a number of podcasts and everyone asks this question and I kind of give the same answer where like, I love to gamble on sports and that's obviously where like I draw my income from talking about gambling on sports, but at the heart of it, like me as a human being, I'm a sports fan. Like I've been watching sport. I just turned 37 last month. I've been watching sports since 1990. Like that was the first year I watched. Giants won the Super Bowl, first year I ever watched, which was really great. So for me, it was like less like, did I miss gambling on sports? Like I did. Like I missed the sweat. And then when I had Justin Rose to win the Colonial and he missed that birdie putt on 18 to get into the playoff, I was like, well, maybe I didn't really miss the sweat so much. But while I did miss gambling, like I just miss watching sports because it occupies so much of my time. Like I don't really watch a ton of scripted television. I don't really I'm not a big movie guy. I watch sports. So it was kind of like, what do I do with my time? Well, I moved I would say like if you were to construct a list of worst times to move, I would say in the middle of a global pandemic would be towards the top of the list. So not only moved, but moved in with my girlfriend. First time I've ever lived with a girl. And that presents its own unique challenges, of course. So kind of been dealing with that. And then on the more like vanity selfish side, I've been running like outside. I've run like 3 miles a day now. So I've gotten back into pretty good shape. And, and I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but maybe like, smoking weed and playing video games, try and pass the time. So that's really what it was until golf came back and UFC, obviously NASCAR, and now soccer as well. And God willing, we will get, now that we're in July later this month, baseball, hockey, and the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to find hobbies to do, so I'm glad you found something. But I'm also curious because you were talking about the vanity aspect. I don't think hair counts as vanity, but like there is an upkeep perspective, and you value hair. It seems like, at least. It seems like you value looking good. So. Yes. Yeah. What was it like for you not to be able to go to a barber for 3 months? It was kind of like, I feel like the first like month or so of quarantine, it was really like, I don't know, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I was like very proud of staying at home at that point in time where it's like, I'm not politicizing anything or saying like people should feel differently about anything or whatever. But like that first like month plus, I was very like team. We don't know what the deal with this virus is. We don't know how bad this is going to be. There's so much and I still think to a degree there's a lot unknown about it. But I feel like we can all agree like we feel better about stuff now than we did like 2-3 months ago. Like the world's not going to end, and like I kind of felt like, oh my God, is the world going to end? So at that point it was kind of like I was like aggressively team stay inside, don't go anywhere. And I kind of like didn't really care for a while. Like I actually I was going to move in with my girl on I think April or May 1st. We pushed it back a couple months, and I ended up, because I was living by myself at the time, when all of this first went down, I actually went to her family's house where she lived, and I stayed with her family for like a month, and like none of us were going to get like, and I was with my girl, and it's not like I was like trying like to go out and like date or anything. So for a while it was okay. And then like as time dragged on, I was like, like I like to have my hair look a certain way. I get my hair cut once a week. I'm extremely vain. I'm extremely anal about it. And it was sucked for a while. And now that like things are open, I had maybe been doing stuff a little black market haircuts a little bit as time wore on a little bit. But yeah, it was a little difficult. But now I'm back to my once a week routine and feeling pretty good about it. And yes, that stuff does matter a lot to me, probably more than I'd be willing to admit.
Well, Nick, you are a video personality, so you do need to make that work. And
Ed, you're giving me too much credit here. I was like this before I ever did video, so just to be fair.
Oh well, but now it's part of your work. So, and you're back with You Better You Bet. We're doing some video today with this, so I think you're justified in that.
Thanks.
Nick, we brought you on to talk some baseball and basketball. And the unique aspect of this MLB season is that it's going to be a 60-game season. How does that impact your philosophy on the futures markets?
Well, I mean, I think you can look no further than the way World Series prices have changed, right? And I think that given, and this is not like an earth-shattering take by me, or splitting the atom or anything like that, but there is going to be so much more variance in a 60-game regular season than you will see in a 162-game season. Like math and logic kind of dictate that's going to be the case, and common sense, right? That there's going to be a ton more variance, and look no further than what the Washington Nationals, last year's World Series champion, and it's a stat that's going to be beaten to death over the course of the next couple of weeks until baseball comes back. 60-game start last year of 27-33. Now, look, maybe you could say, well, if you knew it was a 60-game season, maybe Davey Martinez manages a little differently, and maybe it doesn't turn out like that. But I think we're going to see here where there are a lot of teams that I think people assume will make the postseason. We can run down the list. It's the usual suspects atop the odds board, right? I think, and I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, and I would consider both of you guys to be probably sharper gamblers than I am. I'm more of entertainment host who also gambles. But from my perspective here, it would not surprise me in the least if at least one of those teams towards the top of the odds board misses the playoffs. And conversely, if you take a team that's maybe got the tools to put together a good 60-game run, but maybe over the course of 162 games will peter out for whatever the reason, it's not outside the realm of possibility that a team like that could get into the postseason. So I'm a Yankees fan. I'm from New York. I love my Yankees. I'm not a front runner. Also the Giants and Knicks. I think Knicks kind of disqualifies me from all front running status here. I want my Yankees to win the World Series. And in a normal year, I'd probably be a homer and bet on my Yankees to win the World Series. But in a year like this, I'm not rushing to bet on the Yankees and the Dodgers. Coronavirus has kind of changed the game here in so many different ways. What happens if Garrett Cole gets coronavirus in the middle of the postseason, right? And he's the guy that the Yankees paid $300 million to, and all of a sudden he's out for that series, and you got to have, a 7-game series against, the hated Houston Astros or the Indians, a team that I'm really high on, or whatever it may be, where I almost don't think that you can go to the top of the odds board this year with confidence like you may have done in past years. And by past years, I mean every other year where there was not a global pandemic, which was all of them, dating back to the Spanish flu in 1918, I guess, right?
Yeah. So are you willing to bet futures markets in general, knowing how high variance there is, how high variance it's going to be this season? Or are you trying to exploit teams, like you said, that may be a bit more volatile that could put together a 60-game stretch? Are you just kind of staying away, or are you still willing to bite on some of those more volatile teams?
I'm just going to be real with you guys, and it's been interesting because it's kind of been like social experiment almost on You Better You Bet. Jim, you come on the show, and Ed's obviously been on the show too, where, I'm kind of asking guys, where are you at with the futures market? And I feel like we've all got thoughts, right? I have thoughts on teams that I like in the NFL. I'm high on Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Surprised. I love the Cowboys this year in the NFL. But I'm not really rushing to the window to place futures wagers on the National Football League or really Major League Baseball or the NBA right now. And the reason for that is we don't know how any of this is going to look. How can you bet a future on the National Football League? Well, are there going to be fans in the stadiums? Are they going to play a full 16-game season? Is there going to be any training camp? I think the preseason is going to get cut. Will there be any preseason games? None of us have any idea how this is going to look. We just don't know. So I've got thoughts on the NBA. I've got a lot of thoughts on Major League Baseball. I've got thoughts on the National Football League, but I'm not rushing into the futures market. And it's not because I don't want to. It's because I don't feel like it's a prudent expenditure of my money right now. And what I found here, and I'm not going to speak for everyone in blanket absolutes here, but I feel like most of the cappers that we've had on, pro bettors or people that do sports betting stuff in the media like me, I feel like most of them kind of feel the same way right now. And it's unfortunate because we all have thoughts, but I don't think that most of us are really rushing to put our money down right now just because of all the unknown.
So let's tap into those thoughts then. Maybe not a team you're willing to bet, but are there teams in general you're looking at as being interested in the World Series market for 2020?
Oh, yeah. I love the Cincinnati Reds, and I love the Reds kind of before the pandemic, and for a lot of I'm sure like you guys probably share that. I feel like everyone was kind of on the Cincinnati Reds, especially now that we're going to have the designated hitter in the National League. I think obviously helps the Reds with a top-heavy rotation. I really like the Cleveland Indians, more so than I like the Twins. I like the Indians now more post-pandemic than I did pre-pandemic, and here's a reason why I kind of really like the Indians. And I like the Phillies as well, and I'll give a reason why I like the Phillies after I talk about the Indians here, where normally in Major League Baseball, and I think this is kind of like the prevailing thought, the manager doesn't really matter in Major League Baseball to a great degree, like until we get to the postseason. It's like why I kill Dave Roberts every October, because the Dodgers have this stacked lineup and rotation. And then they get to the World Series or the NLDS or wherever they're going to choke this year. And Dave Roberts turns into robo-manager, and he's going to start making moves that don't make any sense because, that's what the numbers tell him to do. And he always ends up screwing it up. So in a 60-game scenario where each game is heavily more magnified, I think the importance of the manager in Major League Baseball is going to matter more this year than it ever has before. So I look at a team like the Indians with a great manager like Terry Francona, and I think that's like a major boon in their favor to have a guy like Terry Francona. And I like the front of their rotation as well. Like even with Corey Kluber now in Texas, like I love Clevenger, we like Bieber, we like Plesac, we like Carrasco, we like some of these pitchers here. The Philadelphia Phillies are an interesting team, and like if Arrieta can be even like halfway decent in that as the third starter for that team, I like their rotation. I think that they've got starters they could potentially bump back into the bullpen. I had grown tired of Joe Girardi as Yankees manager as a Yankees fan, but like he did win a World Series, got to the playoffs in most years, and I have a feeling that Bryce Harper's just going to put together a monster 60-game campaign coming off, what was a disappointing year for him last year. So I like the Phillies. I think the Blue Jays are probably worth a look with that unbelievable lineup with the variance of a 60-game season. Kind of the same thing with the San Diego Padres. So these are all teams that I'm looking to target, in that mid-range. It's not that I don't think teams like the Yankees or Dodgers can't win the World Series, but I'm less willing to bet on them now than I would have been in the past.
Excellent. Let's go a little bit over to the player side of things. Are there any futures there, for MVP that you are looking at? Yeah,
I like Bryce Harper a lot in the National League to win MVP. And I acknowledge that this is a bit narrative-y, and that's kind of been like one of my shticks here. It's a lot of narrative-based stuff. I just have a feeling, and generally I think when you bet on things just on feeling, that generally goes pretty poorly, but F it. I'm going to do it anyway. Where he was bad last year, bad by his standards. I think like in normal standards, I think he was okay. And I know that was like a big topic last week, was Bryce bad last year. By his standards, I think that's fair to say. It is an absolutely stacked lineup that the Phillies are putting together. They're not going to be playing games in cold weather, obviously, now that the season's starting later on in the summer. And I just think he's going to be on fire, man. And I love that lineup. I love a lot of the pieces around him. Like I love the addition of Didi Gregorius there, hitting in that bandbox. And, Real Muto's obviously fantastic. And I love Rhys Hoskins. And I think he's got a lot of support around him in the lineup. So maybe a bit narrative-y, but I love me some Bryce Harper for NL MVP. And I like the Phillies to go over their win total as well.
Well, and you think about Bryce Harper, too, and you're thinking about archetypes of players who can just go nuts. A 60-game span for Bryce Harper, that can be really freaking good. And I think that you're taking the right approach there, where you want to target players who can go ballistic over a 60-game sample. And Bryce Harper's done that over a 150-game sample, but we've seen it even higher over 60 games. So I think that archetype of player makes a lot of sense. And Harper, again, specifically, we know he can do that for sure, too.
And I think here's what's kind of scary about that, though, conversely, and it's what makes this so volatile. Like, I'm a Yankee fan. I hate to keep saying that, but I keep bringing up these examples, but they're the ones that are nearest and dearest to my heart. But we remember, and I want to say, and I forget which year it was, so forgive me for this. A quick Google search would be able to find out which it was. But the year that Derek Jeter started, the first month and a half of the season, hitting under 100, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and I think it said the slump, where even a guy like Jeter, and some people think he's overrated, foolishly in my opinion, but when a guy of that stature, it's baseball. The best players struggle over the course of a long season. It's a very difficult game. It's I always say that, I used to say in my single days, if you go 1 for 10 on a night out, and you hit on, 10 girls on a night out, you go 1 for 10, you make the Hall of Fame. Like in baseball, you only have to go 3 for 10 and you make the Hall of Fame. Like it is a difficult sport. And like over the course of a season, you're going to have periods where you're really cold. So I just think that like, look, I gave you the Bryce Harper pick and I feel good about it. But I mean, what if Bryce hits 230 over 60 games? What if Mike Trout hits 250 over 60 games? Like not likely, but certainly within the realm of possibility. Over 162 games, you eliminate a lot of that variance. In 60 games, there's going to be a lot more of it.
Well, and when you talk about guys like Bryce Harper and Derek Jeter, you're talking about regression to the mean, right? You're talking about regression to their mean behavior. And, we usually think about regression as like, coming back from an outlier performance. But in this case, like we can expect Bryce Harper to be better just because of the season last year.
Absolutely. And like, again, like love the lineup around him. Coming off the season where he wasn't that great. This is all narrative that I'm throwing out there. Here,
there's data for Bryce. No. There's data for Bryce too, so you're good.
No, this is a math-based narrative, Nick. You're all good on.
Great. Well, you guys can fill in the blanks on the Pythagorean theorem or whatever the hell we're talking about here. I'll stick with my narrative here on Bryce Harper.
Let's shift gears here and talk about the NBA because we're now in July, Nick, which means the NBA is coming back this month too. The schedule just came out. So any team stand out to you as being undervalued within the futures market on the NBA side of things?
All right, so let's talk about the NBA here. I think this kind of falls, unfortunately, under the same umbrella of Major League Baseball. Like, I think, like, there are going to be people, and I will probably be one of them over the course of the next month because we'll get caught up in the excitement. And quite frankly, it's more fun to talk about it like this, where it's almost like we are handicapping this like there's no coronavirus, right?
Right.
What happens if, like, LeBron James gets coronavirus? Is it outside the realm of possibility that we could see a team in the playoffs have to forfeit a series? Like, I would pay a lot of my own money for that not to happen. I don't want that to happen. I want more than anything for there to be sports for many different reasons, many of them selfish. But like, I just feel like we can have this conversation, but I feel like that's kind of the cloud hanging over everything right now is what happens if blank, and blank is stuff related to coronavirus. So I can be like, yeah, we can have a conversation as if like it doesn't exist and we can do that right now. But like, that's in the back of my mind again. Sure. So that kind of makes me feel like, I don't know how great I feel about like putting futures down or even having conversations like this, but we have to because this is what we do. So let's do it. I don't feel as good about the Milwaukee Bucks as I did pre-pandemic. Because if you look at their price on the FanDuel Sportsbook, and Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's highly similar to what it was pre-pandemic. Here's the difference. There's no home court advantage. There are no fans here. So I don't know how we could price the Bucks the same way. Does that mean the Bucks can't win the title? No, but I ain't betting them at that price here. I don't feel as good about the Lakers without Avery Bradley, even like if they bring J.R. Smith back. I mean, J.R. Smith's kind of like we haven't seen him do anything this year. Bradley's a good defensive player. I think we kind of look at a team like the Clippers, and that's a team that I feel really good about, assuming no coronavirus and everyone plays. We love the coach. We love Doc Rivers. And here's something else that I think we have to take into account where I think that games are probably going to be more defensive than they had been. We've heard odds makers talk about this, where when you're playing at home in front of the crowd and the crowd starts to get juiced, and we've seen the Warriors do this and a million other teams do it, where, runs can snowball very quickly because you've got the adrenaline of the crowd behind you. Well, there's going to be no crowd. So I think that defense is really going to play a pretty large part in how a lot of this works out. So I would almost look to really good defensive teams and almost give defensive teams an edge here, teams with great coaching an edge here. It's one of the reasons why I don't love the Philadelphia 76ers because I'm not really a Brett Brown fan. But then I think you could maybe make the argument like another reason why you don't like the Sixers is because they were so great at home this year, right? And now like they're not playing at home now. They were a terrible team on the road. So people will say, oh, well, they've got Embiid and they've got Simmons and they've got Tobias Harris and they've got these good players, but they can't win away from home. And now like they don't have the home court advantage. So I think you can maybe bang on the Philadelphia 76ers for that reason. So I think you could go down the list in many different directions. And I think there are many different conclusions that you can draw. It's just so much unknown. But like I said, I would definitely not back the Milwaukee Bucks at this point, given their price tag right now.
Yeah, the Sixers have some other problems in that they act like knuckleheads sometimes on the court too. So, and that's probably not going to go away even with
like what would you say? Like if we were to like set odds on players' likelihood to get coronavirus, like what would Joel Embiid be to get the coronavirus?
Nick, please set that market somewhere. If you just have to do it on your show, let me bet into that market. That would be great.
Yeah, I'll have to. Yeah, I'll get taken to the cleaners because my market will not be sharp. So I'm not even going to.
Protect Joel Embiid.
Well, no, I mean, please, yes.
Yeah, Nick, I love what you're talking about in terms of like just the different environment that they're going to play down there and how that and what you're saying about the futures market. Can you also bring that to kind of the early games? Like, are you expecting to bet unders because you think defense matters, or just because, you know, these guys haven't shot as many basketballs lately? Is there any advantage that you think you can find because of the bubble and the different circumstances?
Well, I think that that's going to be the case here. Like, for instance, I was actually looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook, and like the race for the 8th seed in the NBA in the Eastern Conference. Like the Brooklyn Nets, like might have to call like Kerry Kittles and like Keith Van Horn and like Jason Kidd and get the band back together here a little bit, because like everyone's got coronavirus and like no one's going to go play. And I know that they've got like a sizable advantage here at this point over the Wizards here and also the Magic. But like I you know, if the Nets don't have anyone playing, you know, it's going to be kind of hard to back them, right? I think the Lakers are a team that you could probably look to fade here in terms of the 8-game regular season. Before we hit the playoffs, they're like 5.5 games up on the Clippers here. They're going to be playing teams that have a lot to play for. So I think you could probably look to go against the Lakers. So I think the regular season portion of this, I feel like may provide some opportunities here just from a purely motivational standpoint here. Some teams may have something to play for. Some teams may not have a lot to play for. So I do think that there will be opportunities early on in the regular season resumption here, and look forward to diving into more of those over the next couple of weeks as we get closer to the relaunch.
And the plus of that, too, is you're not dependent on health as much for a single game bet versus a futures bet. So I think it kind of goes with what you were saying before, where maybe you don't want to risk it, if an impactful player winds up testing positive later on. Before we let you go here, Nick, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Patriots signing Cam Newton. Obviously, the big news of this week. Patriots championship odds, they're down to 17-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. They're now minus 230 to make the playoffs. Again, an additional playoff team this year. How are you viewing the Pats with where the market currently stands with Cam Newton now likely the week 1 starter? I
think it's appropriate at this point. And I know that like it's kind of been like a Johnny-come-lately deal where people have kind of like flipped over the course, where everyone was anti-Patriots when we assumed it was Stidham, and now people are pro-Patriots when it's Cam Newton. Well, I actually think that that's kind of fair, like for that to be the case, given that, you know, Jarrett Stidham's never done anything in the NFL, and like we know Belichick is the greatest of all time, but I mean, it's still an unknown quarterback. Tough to really feel good about it. Now, if we're operating under the assumption that Cam is going to be healthy, I don't think there's any doubt the Patriots are a playoff team. And again, I'll say something and relate the NFL to something I said earlier about Major League Baseball, where there's so much unknown, right, entering any of these team sports in America, right, including football. What we do know is that Belichick is the greatest coach of all time. And having Belichick in this weird year, I don't think there's any question that's going to be a major advantage. So I think that's a major boon in the Patriots' favor is to have Bill Belichick there. I think having Cam Newton kind of where I was going on radio when I would do podcasts or I would do terrestrial radio hits and be like, well, look at the Patriots skill position group. It's one of the worst in the National Football League. You know, tight end's obviously a wasteland. Wide receiver, you hope that Sanu can give you more than the nothing he gave you after you traded a second-round pick. You hope the second-year receiver, N'Keal Harry, can step up. Sony Michel obviously is hurt and like can't catch the football, so I don't know how good we feel about that backfield. But having Cam Newton kind of changes everything here. And I think kind of an underrated aspect of the Cam Newton signing is I want to go back to Denver when Josh McDaniels was the head coach there and drafted Tim Tebow in the first round. And this is not meant to be a comparison between Tebow and Cam, because Cam is obviously infinity times the player that Tim Tebow was in the National Football League. But, you know, McDaniels kind of catered an offense around Tim Tebow. He did that. That is an actual thing that happened. And this is going to be a small sample size that I'm referencing here, but this is a thing that happened when Brady was suspended and Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. Jacoby Brissett came in and started a couple games. One of them was a nationally televised Thursday night game against the Houston Texans, and Brissett had a couple long rushing touchdowns in that game on design quarterback runs. And like, you normally never saw that with the Patriots because they had Tom Brady at quarterback. So I actually think McDaniels may be looking at this as like, wow, like I get to be a little bit of a mad scientist here. Whereas with Brady, and it's great because he's Brady and he's the greatest of all time, where you're running the same offense every year. Well, now you can have a couple extra wrinkles here with Cam Newton under center here for the Patriots. I am not as high on the Buffalo Bills as a lot of people are. I'm still not sold that I like Josh Allen, so I don't think Josh Allen sucks. but I'm not sold on Josh Allen as being this great quarterback here. We know the Patriots defense is going to be pretty good, even with the losses, and the interior of that offensive line is so good that I have to think that Cam Newton's going to have success rushing the football. Again, assuming that he's healthy here, I think the market is fairly priced right now on Cam, Bill Belichick, and the Patriots.
Yeah, the market getting higher, but you can justify it for sure. And if only every coach were as adaptable as Josh McDaniels, I think the NFL would be a much better product then. That is Nick Kostos. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at the Kostos, and check out You Better You Bet, available wherever you get your podcasts and on radio.com. Nick, appreciate the time. I'm glad that sports are back, so we can get back into regular flow of things and listen to You Better You Bet. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
And Jim, looking forward to having you on the show this week to break down some NASCAR. Appreciate both of you guys. Hope you, your families continue to stay safe. Same thing to all the listeners. And as always, I got to give my catchphrase here. Until we meet again on this podcast, I am wishing you minimal sweats, winning bets, and the absolute very best of luck.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Covering the future.
Big thank you once again to Nick Kostos for swinging by and breaking down everything that we discussed. A wide-ranging interview there for sure. And Ed, Nick is always an entertaining guy to talk to, and maybe we can get him to introduce his own sports book at some point in the near future.
That's right. I mean, it's just the idea of betting on the odds of Joel Embiid of getting COVID or testing positive for COVID makes me chuckle. I mean, that team in general is just you got to be really frustrated if you're a Sixers fan, right?
Yeah.
There's an infinity of talent. I mean, there's no limit to what Joel Embiid can do on the basketball court. But hasn't really played like that. Had a flame out of the playoffs last year, and we'll see what they do this year.
I'm hoping that they can put it together because I just like watching Joel Embiid, like consuming him from a personality perspective. Like he is one of the more loose NBA players. I think that's the way to put it. He seems like a fun dude. So I hope he puts it together. But my brother-in-law is a Sixers fan, and I can tell you that there is some frustration for sure with regards to that team. Let's move into covering the future here today to talk about some things we are monitoring ourselves at various sports books. Ed, you want to go back to the NFL and talk about Cam Newton going to the Patriots because the Patriots are a team we've talked a lot about, and this is obviously a pretty big change to their outlook. So what are you seeing with the Patriots now that we know Cam Newton will be on that roster to start the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he really definitely raises the floor for the Pats season, right? I mean, they went in with the idea that they were going to start Jarrett Stidham. Now they have a veteran in Cam as well. Just the odds of one of them playing well is much better than if they had only one of them. So, we know what we're going to get with Cam. He's not going to be like he was in his MVP season in 2015, but he's a solid NFL starter. And, if he's healthy, I think he's going to do a pretty good job there. And I do think he's going to be healthy. He had the shoulder injury in 2018. Looked like he had gotten over that last year in 2019 in some of his early play and then broke the foot. The foot injury looks like something that a quarterback can usually come back from as well. So I think he is going to be healthy. He definitely raises the floor. And I think just if you only had Jarrett Stidham, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? Like Jarrett Stidham could have been terrible. Actually, I think there's a better chance that Jarrett Stidham is great than Cam Newton. We have a lot of data on Cam Newton. We know that, he's a very good quarterback, but he's not always going to play like that MVP season. So let's put some numbers behind how much better the markets think that the Patriots are given this acquisition. From before, the Patriots were at 9 wins. This was after the draft. It was minus 120 on the over. Now they've settled in at 9.5 wins. It's minus 110 on the over. And what I do at the power rank is I take NFL win totals and the price to go over and under, and then I back out a rating for each team. And this is, a predicted point spread against an average NFL team on a neutral site, which is particularly relevant in 2020. So when you do this, New England actually increases by about 0.7 points, so about 3/4 of a point better. They go from 8th to 5th, so they have a rating of about 3.2. And what this says, the markets are saying, like, look, they're not in the same ballpark as the 4 main Super Bowl contenders: Kansas City, Baltimore, San Francisco, New Orleans. But now they're the highest contender after them. There's still a pretty big gap between, the top 4 and down to New England. It's about 2 points. I really think there should be a bigger shift. I think this is a good signing for New England. I think I've talked about how I've been high on this team before the draft. You know, when you look at their defense, it was excellent last year. They still have all 4 of their corners that all graded out really well last year. The pass defense was amazing, and that's really the hardest position to replace in the end. One of the hardest, the second hardest position to replace in the NFL behind, obviously, the quarterback. So they still have a lot of talent on that side. They still have Belichick, who's a great coach, and probably someone who's willing to get every single edge possible. Now they have Cam Newton. They have him or Stidham to be the quarterback. I actually think the Marcus probably should have moved a little bit more. It seems like a point and a half would be appropriate.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really interesting discussion because when people talk about Cam, I feel like he has been written off due to injuries, but I think the injury discussion is a bit exaggerated because it's been impactful injuries, but like it's not as if he was super injured before that. He got in a car crash once, and like that happened, but from an NFL perspective, there weren't a ton of injuries, and the shoulder injury, like you said, like there was video of him throwing the ball pretty well last year. We saw Andrew Luck come back from a similar shoulder injury and play really well in 2018. Obviously, things played out differently with Andrew Luck, but like he played at a really high level throughout that 2018 season. So I think that Cam, the injury discussion may be a bit overblown. And if you look at the first 6 games of 2018, because that's when the shoulder injury really cropped up. They had Taylor Heineke come in to throw a Hail Mary in their 7th game. So it was really just 6 games where Cam was healthy. In those 6 games, he played really well. Like, he was putting up good numbers in that time, both from an overall expected points perspective and just as a passer. So if they get that Cam Newton, I know the pass catchers aren't good, but you give that Cam Newton with potentially a rushing ability in a good offensive scheme and with that defense, I think the ceiling on that team, you talk about the floor, but I think the ceiling also is really intriguing if they get that early 2018 version of Cam Newton too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like, let's assume that the defense is still a top 5 unit. I mean, can't really expect them to be, second best, but we expect a little bit of a regression. But let's say it's a top 5 unit, which I think is reasonable. Then the offense has to be average to top 10. Yeah. For them to be a legit contender and be knocking on Baltimore and Kansas City's door in the playoffs.
And the offense could be better this year, too, because, I mean, they do lose Brady, but Isaiah Wynn, their left tackle, missed 8 games last year. David Andrews, their center, missed the entire season. Mohamed Sanu, as Nick alluded to, didn't come in until mid-year. They added a couple of tight ends in the draft as well. N'Keal Harry was hurt the first half of the year. So they had a lot of injuries on offense, a lot of impactful injuries, specifically to Wynn and to Andrews. So there are paths to that offense getting better despite losing Brady. So I think that they're very interesting. I'd agree that maybe the market didn't react enough to this change with Cam Newton coming in. Moving to my covering the future, I'm going to talk more about some NASCAR this week, and we're going to stick with the exact same driver. Ryan Blaney did not pay off last week at Pocono, and Pocono and Indianapolis are very similar tracks. They are big, they are fast, they are flat, the only 2 tracks on the circuit that check all those boxes. So if Blaney didn't work out in Pocono, you'd think I'd avoid him this week. You're giving me too much credit. I'm not that smart. I'm going to go back to Ryan Blaney once again this week at 11-1 for the Big Machine Hand Sanitizer 400, which is a glorious name for a race. Blaney is a top-ranked driver in my model straight up for this week. It is the most positively my model has ever viewed Ryan Blaney. That dates back to the start of last year. So if we look at the drivers in Blaney's range within this model, 36 drivers have had a projected finishing position within a half position either direction of Blaney. Small sample, 36 drivers. They have 10 wins out of those 36 drivers, 19 top 5s. So a 28% win rate and a 53% top 5 rate. Last year, Blaney had a 4th place average running position at this exact same track. It is one of 3 straight top 10 average running positions for Blaney at this track. So although he's never finished better than 7th, he's had good cars and good runs, and I care more about that than finishing position. Blaney has already shortened from an open of 13-1, so I'd grab him at 11-1 while you still can, because that number could continue to move, and I want to buy him at 11-1. If you want a bit of a longer shot, or if you're just bored of betting Blaney because I've recommended him like 19 times in this podcast, I think you could consider Eric Almirola at 42-1. Almirola will also start within the top 12 spots. He's not great at a lot of things, but he can maintain track position decently well. And Almirola has shown some upside recently. He has 4 straight top 5 finishes, and 2 of those came with a top 10 average running position. He also had a top 10 average running position in Fontana this year and in Indianapolis last year. So similar tracks, Almirola has run well. The Stewart-Haas racing cars always bring big speed to this track type. Almirola has been cranking things up on similar tracks, so I'm okay buying into him at 42-1. The better market for Almirola will still be for a podium finish or for a top 5 finish once those markets are available, but I am still comfortable buying into him to win at 42-1. That is the longest of any driver who will start in the top 12 spots. Alex Bowman's second longest at 35-1, so I am okay taking the plunge there on Almirola at 42-1, but my favorite bet for this week, once again, Ryan Blaney at 11-1 to win in Indianapolis. And it's been interesting for me because my model has consistently been higher on Ryan Blaney, and it's paid off once this year in Talladega. But do you ever question, what the model is saying when it continuously says to go to the exact same person, or does that comfort you? I guess it could go either way.
I mean, it depends. I mean, that's why you kind of got to watch races and follow what's going on with the team. If there's something that is clearly off with his crew or his car or whatever, then maybe you go away from it. But if not, then I think you trust the process of your model.
Speaking of Joel Embiid, trust the process. And we'll go back to Ryan Blaney once again for this week. That is all that we have for today here on Covering the Spread. Big thank you once again to Nick Kostos. Make sure you give him a follow on Twitter at the Kostos, and check out You Better You Bet on radio.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Ed, what's going on for you over at the Power Rank this week?
Yeah, over on my podcast, the Football Analytics Show, we talked about soccer, as in football analytics. I had Michael Cayley on. He's a soccer analytics expert. He's been doing expected goals on Twitter for forever. Actually found out that he is a PhD in religious studies.
Wow.
And not the quantitative kind.
Interesting.
So we talked about that. We talked about soccer analytics and basically how they go about collecting the data for expected goals. So it was pretty interesting how manual that was. Talked about the Premier League, and if you're a fan of the U.S. men's national team, we actually spent a lot of time talking about that team and whether you can have any hope moving forward. So that's the Football Analytics Show. And then also over at the Power Rank, sign up for my free email newsletter. You can get my full NFL preseason rankings based on market win totals from FanDuel. Just go to thepowerrank.com.
Alrighty, powerrank.com, or thepowerrank.com, and the Football Analytics Show as well to check out Ed's work, and follow Ed on Twitter at thepowerrank. I am at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast, DFS Podcasts for PGA and NASCAR going up. NASCAR one up later today, and the PGA one posted already. You can find that at the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. As always, thank you, Cal. And thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Hopefully all of you are staying safe and staying healthy out there, and hopefully you're enjoying the return to sports. Hopefully that return to sports continues, and we'll talk to you once again next week. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.